Yes, item number 7 is application 151101. It has several parcel numbers, 107-111-32767779 and 80. This is a public hearing to consider an appeal of the zoning administrator's approval of this application for a proposal to convert approximately 1,920 square feet of an existing 4,800 square foot agricultural barn into a winery and a tasting room with a capacity for 20,000 gallons and production of less than 5,000 gallons. The project includes public wine tasting Saturday and Sunday between 12 to 5 p.m. and by appointment only on Friday and passport days. Winery and club events at the tasting room, up to 16 per year with up to 50 guests between 12 to 5 p.m. on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Outdoor special events up to 10 per year with up to 200 guests, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday between 12 to 9 p.m. with live music between 4 to 9 p.m. Cleanup between 9 to 10 p.m. Excluding tasting room and winery events during large and small special events. This requires a commercial development permit, a map correction to modify and approve building envelope, an agricultural setback reduction, and a geologic and archaeologic report review. The applicant is Lester Properties. The owner is Lester Properties. This is in the 2nd Supervisorial District, and the project planner is Sheila McDaniel.
Good morning. You noticed I provided you a few post-it notes. So before I start my presentation, I was going to provide you specific page numbers of the important documents for consideration today for ease of our conversation as we go along. So the zoning administrator approved conditions of approval were on page 17 of your packet. 16, sorry. And the zoning administrator staff report is on page 27. Yeah, so the bold numbers are the numbers for the staff report, the smaller numbers are the previous report. So your zoning general plan maps are on page 244. And your project plans are on page 238. And they'll be provided in the staff presentation today, but should you need to reference it, I believe you also have large copies as well. And the mitigated negative declaration is contained in the zoning administrator staff report, and it's on page 38 of the document. So important components of the mitigated negative declaration that were under consideration by the zoning administrator and by your commission today would include the program statement, which is on page 89. That's the full scope of the applicant's program statement, as well as the applicant's consultant revisions based on public meetings. That's page 89. Your traffic analysis, I'm not sure if I'm going too fast here, but your traffic analysis is on page 207. The noise study is page 175. And I believe I already noted the findings are on page 225. I didn't provide separate findings as an attachment to the Planning Commission report, so that's where they live.
Now, am I correct in thinking that normally with a document this size, there would have been more table of contents? This is sort of just because everything got done late?
No, I suppose I could have included the findings as an attachment. It's just a lot of paper.
Well, I would like to request in general that when we have reports that are over 100 pages long, you get a table of contents or you provide tabs. And anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I agree. I have my own Post-its here in this because I found it was noting where certain things were already, but I appreciate this, but yeah, or even just an email doing what you just did.
It will do.
Yeah, thank
not
you.
Not just yourself.
Okay.
We're reading 200-300 pages at a time. I think it would help us tremendously to have a table of contents. This is very helpful because you spend half your time reading it.
Yeah.
Things.
It's difficult to navigate, especially as we start having conversations about conditions and findings, and people are having trouble figuring out where they're located in the document. So
it might also be helpful if you do not include the 8.5 by 11 pictures that are really shrunk too much to read, and if you're going to have the large drawings.
I would agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
We've got a bunch of EIRs coming to us, and I'm hoping that they're going to give some roadmaps like this. You get 500 pages to read in a week, you really need it.
I'll be sure to pass that on to long range.
All right.
Okay, so to start the presentation, and I just wanted to note that you were provided a significant amount of late correspondence this morning. So getting into the slide presentation. The Pleasant Valley Road extends from Freedom Boulevard northeast from Highway 1, which is over here, and this is the project area. Within the Altos Hills planning area, the property is located on the east side of Pleasant Valley Road, adjacent to 2000 Pleasant Valley Road, approximately 1,000 feet north of Del Valle Road, within the community of Watsonville in the unincorporated county of Santa Cruz. The application before your consideration today on appeal is comprised of 5 parcels held by the Lester family. It's approximately 192, 193 acres in size. It's characterized by sloping sites, sloping topography from the north to the south, and it's developed with an established vineyard in these 2 locations, with approximately 20 acres in production, a few residents, as you can see, and a 4,800 square foot barn with an adjacent parking area and other accessory structures. The upper central portion of the property contains an existing lawn area with existing pergolas, picnic tables, and barbecue area. The existing barn is located within 200 feet of Type 2A agricultural resource land, and the agricultural resource land is in this location here. It's also held by the Lesters. Access to the existing vineyard is provided by a 20-foot wide paved roadway extending from Pleasant Valley Road and an approximately 16-foot wide upper roadway to the existing lawn area and barbecue area.
Sir, can I ask a quick question? So you've got dissimilarly zoned parcels here, is that right? Some A, some CA?
Yeah, I'll go into that. So the general plan designations for the property. So this little piece at the bottom, that is their existing vineyard. That's a general plan designation of agriculture. And as you can see, I put little stars on the parcels, but if you want to follow the red dot, this is the perimeter of the entire property. Okay, so sorry, it goes along this direction all the way around and down. So as you can see, the brown area is rural residential, and then that upper area in the upper reaches of the property is mountain residential. The area of development is located within the rural residential portion of the property. The implementing zone districts associated with the properties are residential agriculture, commercial agriculture, and special use in this area. And the Pleasant Valley area, as you can see, is comprised of commercial agriculture in this area and residential agriculture in this area along the northeastern side of Pleasant Valley Road. And there are approximately parcels between 10 and 40 acres in size, and there's smaller residential parcels between 2 and 10 acres in size. Now, Pleasant Valley Road is an approximately 40-foot wide local street right-of-way developed with 2 paved lanes varying in width from approximately 20 to 24 feet. And it extends from Freedom Boulevard, and then it extends from Hames as well. Hames is here. Hames crosses from Freedom, as you know, all the way down to Corlitas. The Hames Road and Freedom Boulevard are both identified as major collector streets. Freedom Boulevard is a 60-foot wide right-of-way developed with 2 travel lanes and bicycle lanes. Hames Road is a 40-foot wide right-of-way developed with 2 travel lanes. And I provided some shots to show you what the road looks like at various locations. There's the property under consideration. Slide 1 here, you can see a vehicle on the roadway. Slide 2, continuing upward toward the property, and so forth in front of nearby the property, and then directly in front of the applicant's property. And you can see their gate. This is looking south toward their property and back down Pleasant Valley Road. So the proposed project essentially includes production of 60 to 72 tons of grapes on site for sale to off-site wineries, 5,000 gallons of wine production. The application includes public wine tasting room events, large special winery events, and then a project includes site improvements associated with it, including barn improvements, interior road improvements, as well as parking and circulation improvements. So with regard to wine tasting, the applicant's proposing tasting hours on Saturday and Sunday between 12 and 5 p.m. and Friday and passport days by appointment only between 12 and 5 p.m. Wine tasting is not proposed during small special events or large special events. And the application includes wine tasting room events. The applicant is proposing 16 wine tasting room events a year, such as wine club pickup events, winemakers dinners, wine release events, etc. Passport days are not proposed to be included in the tasting room events. Wine tasting events are proposed Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for up to 50 people between 12 and 5 p.m. within the barn room exclusively and outdoor deck area in the barn. No amplified music is proposed at the tasting room, and then pre-approved caterers are proposed for these events with no on-site food prep. The project also includes large special winery events, 10 events a year for up to 200 people in the upper portion of the lawn area, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday between 9 and 12 p.m. Between May and through October. And then again, they're not proposed during passport weekends. That's the larger wine tasting event. Not proposed to occur as back-to-back weekend day, so you're not going to have a Saturday and a Sunday or a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday event planned. The large events propose outdoor live amplified music between 4 and 9 p.m. in the upper lawn area only. Rented portable restrooms and tenting are proposed. Here's the site plan for the property. You can see Pleasant Valley, access to the site, a 20-foot wide right-of-way, the existing barn, and then the upper area. So this is an enlarged plan. So the existing lower barn parking area is proposed to be improved with fire turnaround, meeting CAL FIRE standards, as well as 26 standard parking spaces and 2 accessible spaces. The upper roadway to the large event area is proposed to be widened to 20 feet to meet fire standards. And 72 parking spaces are proposed for the large event, and also for overflow parking should it be required. This is an informal area that can be expanded to provide additional spaces. There's sufficient area for more than 72 spaces, but it's not proposed or recommended. So this is a picture of the existing barn. So the improvements to the barn include approximately 1,920 square feet of the barn areas proposed to be remodeled. Sprinklers will be provided. There's an existing hydrant on the site just west of the barn. The winery crush area will be located under the existing awning portion of the barn, approximately 460 square feet. Wine barrel storage is proposed behind the tasting room, is approximately 492 square feet. And an approximately 752 square foot tasting room is proposed, and a 500 square foot wine tasting deck on the south portion of the barn. And then some pictures of the site for you. The site entry showing the 20-foot wide right-of-way. And then this is looking back toward the entry toward Pleasant Valley. Again, this is this piece over here. This is their vineyard. That's part of the application for under your consideration. This is the picture of the barn parking area and existing. It will be improved, provide actual spaces that are striped and fire and access meeting fire standards. This is the upper access road, which will be widened. It's currently 16 feet. This is the proposed 72 parking space for large events. And the existing picnic area that I explained earlier. So if you go back. And then with regard to the use consistency, wineries are an allowed use in all zone districts associated with the property. The winery tasting and events are proposed within the residential agricultural portion of the property exclusively. The vineyard is proposed it's existing on the CA, so that's a principal permitted use already, the vineyard area. County Code Section 1310-322B states that the purpose of the residential agricultural zone district is to provide areas of residential use where development is limited to a range of non-urban densities of single-family dwellings in areas outside the urban service line and rural service line on land suitable for development, with adequate water, septic system suitability, vehicular access, fire protection, with adequate protection of natural resources, with adequate protection from natural hazards, and where small-scale commercial agriculture such as animal keeping, truck farming, specialty crops such as vineyards, can take place in conjunction with the primary use of the property as residential. The proposed winery, wine tasting and sales are proposed within the residential ag zone district and special use portion if there's any overlap, which special use allows residential agriculture. So for effective purposes, the site is zoned residential agriculture. Vineyard areas are allowed as principal permitted uses without a use approval within both the commercial agriculture and residential ag zone district. The proposed winery uses are discretionary uses within both the residential ag zone, special use, and the commercial agricultural zone district. All respective zone districts require a development permit with a level of approval based on the gallons of wine produced by the winery and public tasting. Pursuant to County Code Section 1310-637, wineries are regulated. If the winery doesn't meet the strict limits of production, tasting, noise, hours of operation established by the winery regulations, the code specifically states that these limits may be exceeded by obtaining a level 5 approval. That's a zoning administrator approval. So the project originally went to the zoning administrator for consideration. And then for zoning administrator items, the code specifically states that these limits shall be set by condition on the use approval based on the individual merits of the location and surroundings of the proposed winery. So with regard to winery regulations, it's a long-standing practice of the planning department to interpret wine tasting as any winery marketing event, private or public, provided by a winery where any number of individuals are in attendance at the winery. Further, the department has not regulated wineries in terms of defining what a tasting is. Rather, the department has regulated the number of wine tasting events, number of attendees at the events, noise, and hours of operation. So it thus can include wine growers, dinners, public tasting, private tasting, winery marketing events, and large private events. This is because the winery code allows wineries to exceed the strict limits set with a conditional use permit approved by the zoning administrator. So I evaluated a few other examples that were recently approved in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years or so. 2 examples were evaluated: Silver Mountain, which I actually happened to grow up adjacent to, and Regal Winery. Both are in the Summit area. Regal, located on the south side of Summit Road, east of Highway 17, within the Agricultural Zone District and Mountain Residential General Plan, was permitted 6 large events with up to 132 guests, in addition to the existing and permitted unlimited number of private and public wine tastings for up to 64 guests. Silver Mountain Winery, which is a little bit more remote, had more difficult access, substantially smaller. It's located on the north side of the Miller Cutoff, approximately 3/4 miles south of Summit Road, within the residential ag zoning. Was permitted 12 events per year for up to 50 people, with some significant limitations on access to the site and parking availability. So the appellant has asserted that special events, such as the large events associated with the proposed winery, are not permitted in the residential ag zone district, specifically because proposed event use regulations included in the planning department code modernization package have not been adopted by the Board of Supervisors. And your packet includes a board letter provided, I believe, by Supervisor Coonerty, where he asked for, let's see, so that would be page 343 of your packet. Page 343. So just as some background, I provided, I reviewed the entire trail of board hearings related to this issue, the draft code associated with the issue, as well as long conversations with long-range planning, as well as the planning director regarding the intent of this direction. So the board asked for that the department put a hold on consideration, but did not impose a moratorium pertaining to weddings and events at wineries. They put a hold on activities on residential properties in rural areas that are considered under the home occupation regulations until such time that the code modernization is in effect. So the code modernization your commission has seen it, I believe. It's going forward, it's under environmental review at this time. Thus, the winery is being considered under the winery ordinance as it has always been, and is not in conflict with the board's direction to put a hold on wedding events associated with home occupation. This is not a home occupation application.
Ms. McDaniel, just to clarify, you're not making any assertion that your analysis is not depending in any way on unheard and unpassed pending legislation, is that correct?
That's correct, thank you.
Can I ask where the project is in terms of the environmental review? How soon can we expect that?
I believe at least a year out. There's a whole packet of information. There's revised agricultural regulations, home occupation regulations, wedding event regulations, updated agricultural regulations under consideration. So it's going to be quite some time. Expect at least a year or so. So the barn is currently a non-habitable structure, not subject to the same health and safety requirements as when the land division was approved, because it's non-habitable. But based on the higher human occupancy associated with wine tasting, the applicant was required to provide a combined geologic and geotechnical report review to confirm site safety for wine tasting in the building. These reports were accepted, and the project is conditioned to comply with all recommended requirements. as well as comply with the current accessibility standards, building and other agency requirements, including fire sprinklers. So I just want to turn your attention to the agricultural buildings, approximately 122 feet from a parcel with type 2A agricultural resource. As I indicated, it's held by the Lester family. Nonetheless, the Agricultural Protection Code requires that anything less than 200-foot buffer be, agricultural buffer reduction be approved for that application. This application went before the Agricultural Policy Advisory Commission and obtained a recommendation for approval. Because the properties are held, all 5 properties are being held by the same property owner, the Agricultural Commission did not require a fence at this time unless the property is sold separately, in which time then they would require a 6-foot solid board fence. They felt that the existing landscaping, substantial vegetation, maybe we could find another photo of that, is sufficient to provide this area here, sufficient to provide an agricultural buffer between the existing site, as well as acknowledgement that the Lesters would, take consideration for their guests and not do any operations that might interfere with their activities on the site. So the environmental review is required for the proposed project per the California Environmental Quality Act, and the environmental review focused on the potential impacts in the areas of cultural resources, geology, soils, land use and planning, and transportation, traffic, as well as noise. The full scope of the environmental review analysis is included in the initial study. A preliminary determination to issue a negative declaration with mitigations associated with temporary noise impacts for construction of road widening was included in the negative mitigations. And this project was subject to mandatory public review and comment, with some comments regarding traffic, parking, noise, and water demand. So with regard to cultural resources, an archaeological survey report was completed and found no presence of archaeological resources. With regard to geologic resources, the parcel is located on the Zayani Fault Zone, and at the time of the original land division, the requirements for geology, the scope of the analysis to have a substantially large envelope would have required substantial geologic analysis. So the envelope was smaller at the time of original land division, so they did additional geologic analysis to expand the envelope to include the barn. The project included a traffic, trip volume, and trip generation analysis by Kimley Horn, dated August 15, 2016. And the study concluded the proposed project would result in low volume of traffic. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say with that, and just direct your commission to the traffic consultant. He's here for any questions you may have regarding trips associated with the property. I did want to point out that Public Works did not require the trip generation analysis. It came at the discretion of staff as a result of comments from the public regarding concerns regarding trip generation. However, Public Works, based on concerns about line of sight and safety issues associated with the roadway, they evaluated the street and have made recommended road improvements and suggestions. And Jack Sarikoff is here to address any questions you may have regarding the traffic study or address any of their recommended improvements that they plan to do. They had made a commitment to provide improvements within 6 months, so that's on schedule. The project also includes a noise study prepared by Edward Pack, dated June 30th. Noise levels were taken at 3 separate locations along the property line, one at the western edge of the property at the site entry, and 2 locations on the south property line adjacent to Del Val Road. The maximum and average noise levels comply with the general plan. And again, the noise consultant is here to discuss any questions you may have regarding the noise study. This was accepted both by the environmental coordinator and the zone administrator upon approval.
And am I correct that the The studies or the conditions of approval say that the noise can, or the music or whatever cannot be heard beyond the perimeter of the property?
I believe yes.
Okay.
I should double check that just to be sure. Let me.
Sheila.
I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Sheila.
I just don't want to misquote.
Sheila.
No, okay, it doesn't. So
It's only home occupancy.
So I think the zoning, let me just double check that really fast. So page 20 of your packet, number 7 actually does,
General plan has noise limits at property lines on ag parcels. It's not a 0. There are specified, it comes straight from the general plan and it's reflected in code.
okay, so,
And if I recall, something like 68 decibels or something. We've refereed this before. But it's on ag parcels, it's not 0.
right. So the zoning administrator considered this project on April 21st of this year and approved the project with the revised conditions in your packet, and adopted the negative declaration with mitigation measures addressing the temporary noise impacts associated with road widening. So the approved conditions on page 17, if you could turn your attention to those, I just thought it's worth actually looking at that for a moment to see. So you'll notice that the conditions include standard print, italicized, and strikeout. So the italicized material is the material that was revised by the zoning administrator, and the strikeouts speak for themselves, strikeouts.
Are you proposing further revisions than what the zoning administrator approved?
There are no further revisions proposed by staff with regard to conditions of approval. However, I did want to make a couple revisions to the findings. I see that there was an oversight with regard to referenced number of events authorized by the decision. So if you could turn your attention to page, let's see.
225.
233.
224.
Actually, you're right, it's 224.
Okay, so as you can see, I'm still trying to find it myself. Okay, so on page 225, on finding number 3, the wine tasting on weekends and small winery events, it should say 16 times. The application, the staff's recommendation was 12 and the approval was 16. So please revise that to 16, and then further down under finding 4, please revise that to 16 as well.
Would you mind repeating exactly the definition? I know you told us, but just so, because of that context, it's good to have it. What small winery events are again?
Okay, so the wine tastings are just that, public wine tastings Saturday and Sunday, 12 to 5, by appointment Fridays and passport days. So that's pretty easy to understand. Okay, the small winery events are exclusive marketing events for the winery to distribute wine, have winemakers dinners, growers, those sorts of things. Those are 16 times a year. They're up to 50 people per event. The applicant did indicate they're typically 20 people, but they've asked for 50, but they're typically 20. And those two are, I believe, are between 12 p.m. and 5 p.m. And the wine tasting, and these events are held exclusively at the barn.
Thank you, that's helpful.
And so the wine tasting is not allowed to occur at the tasting room, during the tasting room events, obviously. If you're having a tasting room event, then it's occupied and you can't do public wine tasting. One or the other.
Right.
So the large special events were approved at the applicant's requested, at 6 times per year versus the 10 they requested, okay? Live music is proposed was approved at 12 to 9 p.m. And again, wine tasting and tasting room events are not allowed to occur during large events. So at no time will there be a wine tasting, a small winery event and a large winery event occurring at the same time. They're just precluded by the conditions of approval. So if they're having an event for 100 people in the upper area, they're not going to have the area where the barn is occupied by an event. That parking will be occupied by the guests for the large event.
So I think what you're saying is it's either wine tasting or a small winery, what do we call it?
Or a
Small
large-
winery event or a large one. They're never simultaneous.
Correct.
Okay.
So the conditions of approval, if you start looking through closely, you'll notice I'm trying to highlight the most important components of the conditions of approval. The zoning administrator required a 1-year review from commencement of operations for consideration of how it's going, is it consistent, and is there noise, or are there any things she needs to fine tune. And then also, she added a condition regarding sale of any of the properties associated with the property would require acceptance of the permit conditions by the future property owners or acceptance of the noise levels established at that time. Otherwise, the applicant would be required to apply for an amendment, and then that could result in potential changes to live music allowances to meet the general plan standard.
So the plan would go with the property. Nothing
So-
would change if it changed hands.
Right, if it changes hands to another property owner and that property owner accepts the conditions, then everything's great. If that new property owner goes, heck, I don't want to hear music, then the applicant, prior to sale, they'd have to apply for a permit amendment. We would require updated noise study to consider what are the noise levels at the new property line. Do they meet the general plan standard? Do we need to make adjustments to the allowances that we've made? Okay? And then the zoning administrator, with consideration for the applicant's request to go to 10 large events, she allowed the applicant to apply with an administrative development permit 6 months out from commencement to increase to 10 large events, and to increase the number of events a month. So the large events are only allowed once a month currently. So she commences, sorry?
Where is that?
It's on 23, I think.
Right.
P. It's P on page 23. Right here.
So 6 months following the commencement of operations, the applicant may apply for an administrative permit to increase the number of large events from 6 to 10, increase the number of large events per month, provided they do not exceed 10 events maximum, and increase from 5,000 to 20,000 gallons wine production. And then finally, the applicant was required to provide email notification to surrounding neighbors within 300 feet and to those per the neighborhood notification list associated with the neighborhood meetings. Okay. So as enumerated in the staff report, staff finds that there's no substantive issues that were identified by the appellant that would establish that the zoning administrator erred, that there was an abuse of discretion with regard to the consideration of an action on the proposed project, or that there was a Brown Act violation. Therefore, staff is recommending your commission conduct a public hearing to consider the proposed project. Secondly, adopt the CEQA mitigated negative declaration and mitigation measures and reporting program related to the proposed project pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, and approve application 151101 based on the zoning administrator findings with the 2 revisions I noted to 16 and the revised conditions of approval attached in your packet that were approved by the zoning administrator. And in conclusion, I did want to add that I did say this during the zoning administrator, I want to say it again, just so we're all clear, that the project has received substantial public comment, mostly due to concerns about traffic and noise. And I just wanted to point out that while the project may be determined to be less than significant impact with regard to traffic and noise impacts, and they meet that the noise and the traffic meets the general plan standards, additional restrictions may be placed on the use to ensure that the proposed use meets all of the general purposes of the residential agricultural zone district. And those are called out under County Code section 1310-321. And I just wanted to highlight, I think the one that would probably resonate with the neighbors is item 9, where it's to protect residential properties from nuisances such as noise, vibration, illumination, glare, heat, unsightliness, odors, dust, dirt, smoke, traffic congestion, and hazards such as fire, explosion, and noxious fumes. So I say that only with regard to your determination with regard to its compatibility with the residential zone district. So with that, that's staff's recommendation, unless you have any questions.
I had one question.
Yes.
On page 8, item P of the conditions, it's on page 23 of the staff report.
Page 23.
Which is 6 months following the commencement operations. What was your thinking to give them this expansion after 6 months when you've already set it up to have a review of the permit after a year? Well, doesn't make any sense to me.
During the zoning administrator hearing, there wasn't much of an audience at the meeting. We had 4 people and at that time, a vast number of supportive of communications correspondence from the public. And the zoning administrator felt that, well, you know, I think I could increase this, so she wanted to increase it and then do the review at the 1 year of the entire project. So she revised that to allow it so that she could have consideration at the 1 year event.
Okay, thank you. I think, you know, I think that all ought to happen after a year if it happens. So, okay, thank you.
I have some comments. So I'm going to reserve comments about a discussion about impacts till after the public hearing, but I'd like to start where I always start, which is the regulatory framework. Doesn't matter what the impacts are, is this or is this not allowed in this district is my first question always. And we have some mild, close but not exactly online viewpoint difference I have with the planning staff. So planning, you know, we just heard some from the planning, in the report we heard that there were some other things that have been done many years ago about allowing some of these things at wineries. To me, the most online prior thing that we've seen, and I will acknowledge, as an administrative body, we're not bound by our own precedent, but the Summit Environments Fund purchased a property that was zoned ag on Summit. They wanted to have a site where they could rent for private events, and because it wasn't viewed as an allowable use on ag, they applied for a rezoning and got the board to vote on a rezoning and rezoned it to PR where it is an allowable use. So there's another precedent that they didn't view it as allowable on ag, and I think the staff planning department in that case also took that view, so they went for a rezoning. Now that's not an option here because they're using this as ag, but case can be made. You can't just put any use that you want on an ag parcel. The winery code, which is 310-637, allows for production and storage of wine, and also 2 categories of use only: tasting and on-site sales. So if you're going to have large events, the small events in the conditions and in the description are referred to as tasting events and sales events, wine club. Those have a default maximum of 12 people and some other limits. But we have the discretionary authority to modify those limits for tasting and on-site sales. My view is we don't have, it's outside our discretionary authority to allow large events that aren't either a tasting or on-site sale. And we can't just say because it's a winery and because we can exceed limits. The limits are of the uses. There's 2 uses allowed: tasting and on-site sales. Now, I do think that their intended large-scale events could meet this requirement, but I don't think it's described that way now. If you're going to just rent a facility in sort of a bare way, not tied to the winery, just people want the space to have a family reunion, there's no wine there, there's no set. Event centers are not allowed, even under wineries. So it would be my view that in order to hit a statutory requirement, there'd have to be a tie from these large events to the winery, and if that meant that the people that rented the site were contractually obligated to buy some amount of wine as part of their contract, it would be a thin tie, but it would at least be a tie. But event centers aren't allowed on winery properties. It has to be, in my view, tasting and on-site sales. First I thought that might be a showstopper, but then I realized if they're talk to the applicant, and that is their view. It's not in our conditions yet, but it have to be tied that way, in my view. So that's just something, I know I've talked to staff about it and council and shared my view, but I think there's a solution there to it, but not as written currently. Another question that I have is...
You're going to propose that as an additional condition then?
If we're going to get past the statutory hurdle and go to discussing the impacts, I wouldn't vote for it unless it had that tie. I think it's reasonable in the circumstance, and on my understanding, I'll let them speak in talking with applicant and the representative that they are amenable to that. Part of the reason is this is not just specific to the site issue that we're dealing with here. This is a big deal countywide in all our districts. The influx of hosted tourism-based events with rental sites is a burgeoning problem in all our districts. And I just want to set down a line for me anyway that you just don't put event centers on wineries. They have to be tied to tasting and on-site sales. Otherwise you got to rezone out of ag. But speaking of ag, so I don't recall ever having a ag and CA joint parcel application before. So I'm going to ask Ms. McDaniel, in your findings on page 234, well, hang on, let me see if I got that right.
225, 224?
No, let's see here. Okay, page 224 and 5. So you've got CA findings. So some of this lot, some of the lots here are A, are they not? And some are CA?
So the zoning, one parcel is zone CA, and that's entirely vineyard.
Right. No, the reason I asked this is I thought it was differentially zoned. This is unusual for us to have a multi-parcel. So you've made findings that include a finding that's required for the CA zone, and that has to do with supports agriculture on the ground.
Right, I did so because the 5 parcels are included in the application, and it's CA, even though there's technically no portion of the actual use on the CA parcel.
I appreciate you sharing your decision process, but here's my question. So if I were to make an argument that one portion of this project would only be allowable on A and not CA, but it's actually built on the A lot, are we required by code to use the strictest finding, or can we do that on a lot-by-lot basis? I've never seen this before. And I don't know what planning's position is on that. I don't know if council has an opinion on that. And the reason is that on the A parcel, building the event portion up a little bit is allowed. But on a CA, you can only build things that support agriculture on the ground. A winery does. A vineyard does, storage of barrels does, but we have, and we're not bound by our own precedent, but we have unanimously before said just because something brings in money to help pay for a farm operation, that is not considered supportive of agriculture on the ground. You build a barn to house tractors, that's supportive of agriculture. So because it's on the A zone, the
You mean CA?
It's on the A zone. The event is up there on the A zone.
No, I think you might be mistaken. If we're talking about zoning,
Yeah.
the vineyard is on CA exclusively. There's no part
I'm
of
talking about the event center site.
the event center site is residential agriculture.
And it's on an A underline, right? Is it
No, it's
not?
on rural residential general plan. Underline is rural residential. The commercial agriculture with the A general plan is the vineyard exclusively. There's no portion of the actual application, the event center, the barn, the tastings, any of that on CA.
Okay, because you say A, you list 6 zones, you list 3 designations and 3 zones, so you'll have a total of 6 acronyms. This is unusual for...
Can you go to the map on the...
Yeah, and no, the reason I'm asking this is that I have my own view about how to referee these different zone parcels, but I'd like to hear what the thinking is. If you have different, okay, so if you go to, which one of these?
This piece here, this neon green is the commercial ag,
Right.
as you can see. Commercial ag. This light green is residential agriculture. This blue area for the, 90% of the site essentially is residential ag by virtue that SU allows residential ag, all residential ag uses. So Suffice it to say, this portion of the parcel containing the event application request is on RA property.
Okay, because when you, did you or did you not?
And I did the findings.
Did you list A, did you list A as one of the zone designations in the beginning of your staff report?
No, I think you misunderstand. I think the A is the general plan designation, which corresponds to the CA. If I did, it was a typo.
Well, I saw 6 and 1 was A, so, okay, so that...
So going back over to the general plan designation. So this is, the CA zone parcel has a corresponding general plan designation of ag. The remainder of the property is rural residential, and that corresponds to very moderate slope. The mountain residential corresponds to substantially steeper slopes, so you can see that area in the upper reaches is mountain residential for obvious reasons.
So I'm not quite sure how, I didn't understand, I thought this parcel was ag where the event center was going to go, and that's how I did my analysis, but if it's RR, but here's the question again. If I thought that you couldn't put this building up there and host large events on a CA parcel, and it's not on the CA parcel of this multi-parcel thing, are we constrained by the most, do we have to analyze based on the most constrained zoning? I'm not saying we do, I'm just asking. I've never seen a multi-zone conglomeration permit before.
No, in my opinion would be that you do not. So I think it would depend on the limits of the permitted activity. So you need to make the appropriate findings to cover what's included in the permit. So as to what the permit would allow, you would have to make appropriate findings for that zone.
So okay, I appreciate that. So I had printed out and brought with me ag districts showing that wineries are allowed in ag districts, but you're telling me that the winery itself is in a rural residential. I don't actually have that code printed out here. Well, can you assure me that wineries are allowed on rural residential parcels?
Well, just to be clear, we have a general plan designation. That's agriculture, rural residential, or mountain residential. The corresponding zoning districts include commercial agricultural zoning, residential agriculture, and special use zoning. So 90% of the property is zoned residential ag and special use. Both those districts allow the wineries, and the commercial agricultural district as well, it allows wineries.
So,
but it's not proposed on the
just to clarify, and this is the exact answer I'm looking for to get me out of this concern. But so an RR district and an SU district, anything that's on an ag district is allowed on those allowed in those? Because I only have the ag use chart here.
Okay, so wineries are allowed in the residential ag zoning, the special use zoning, and the commercial agricultural zone district. So it's an allowed use in all zoning that's applied to the property. However, winery is not proposed on the CA piece. That commercial agricultural piece is the vineyard component that supports the winery, the production of the grapes, and that's why it's been required to be included in the application.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like there's a difference. I thought it was ag, but it's RA, and it's the same allowance. Okay, so then that takes you to 1310-637. So, and anyway, I mean, I just didn't know whether we needed to make a finding on the non-CA portion of this multi-zoned parcel according to the strictest requirement, which is CA. As long as we're clear that the findings requirement are different on different pieces of this parcel, I think we'd have to rewrite this finding a little bit because it doesn't meet CA findings to put this event center on another part of the parcel, in my view. So anyway, these are just procedural things relating to code. It's a weird.
Can we not refer this to our very capable county content to resolve?
Well, she can chime in any time. I'd be happy to hear what her thoughts are.
So my thought on this is looking at the findings. So even the way that they're worded, currently it says required findings for development on land zoned CA or agricultural preserve under the code. So that really does relate to development on those zoned parcels. One way to resolve this might be to note that these findings, that the development is for parcels that don't have those zoning, and the application itself is for the entire piece of property, including the alternatively zoned parcels. So I don't know if there's a way that you could consider working that into the finding itself to explain that.
No, and I could conceive of us saying that although this would be the requirement on the CA portion of the parcel, there's no development, so this finding is met because there's no development on that particular subset lot.
I think that would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. And one other thing I want to just put out for us to think about, and this has to do, unlike the parachute, which is a one-off, this is a big thing, starting to put events on vineyards. If there's 5 more vineyards on this road, which all, as a principally permitted use, can put in wineries, and then can come in and ask for special discretionary approval of larger events, I want to caution us all that we not look at the impacts of this thing on the neighborhood when we do that evaluation and hear from the public, as if this is the only one. If there's 5 more vineyards and we say, well, what's the maximum that the neighborhood can take, we better divide it by 6, because the next people are going to come along and make, so that's part of, I want to have use that filter when we look at traffic studies and things, that there's a lot more people coming to this party. And I don't know if that's how traffic studies are written, foreseeing other developments, but they're there, they're right in that valley.
Well, this traffic study actually did, their baseline was Passport Saturday, which would have included the trips associated with the other wineries.
But there's vineyards that don't have wineries yet.
Yeah.
And these people are building a bigger winery on site. Other people may very well do that. There are other vineyards without wineries. Okay, so those were just, I appreciate the discussion on the zoning. I found it confusing because we haven't seen it before. I do think that I could support the idea if we tied their larger events to wine tasting or on-site sales, that I could get over that regulatory hurdle, and we could discuss impacts. That's all I have. Thank you.
But the tie for the wine sales has to be that the wine is produced by that winery. Is that correct?
Well, that's in code already, and I just want to make it clear that a bare rental, we don't allow event centers on these ag parcels. It has to be.
You're going to bring that up if we get to a motion.
Correct. I'll remind someone.
We can rely on you to add it at the appropriate time with good luck.
Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? I'm going to open the public hearing, and I'm going to allow the appellant to go first, Ms. Steinbrunner. If you would start off with, we'll say 4 minutes, and then we'll have comments from the rest of the persons attending.
Thank you. I have some material to give to staff. I have for your review a copy of the flyer that was put at the Carlitos Market, a copy of the letter that was mailed to all people on the address list that was in the staff planning report at the zoning administrative hearing. And I have a copy of a template letter that was handed out at that community meeting that was held June 7th at the Aptos Public Library. It was very well attended by over 50 people, including Ms. Johnson and her mom. That was great to see them there. And I also have a copy of a petition that was circulated, but it didn't make it around the room. So, but I have that because it was presented publicly. I also have for your board, I think a number of digital photographs were conveyed to you. I also took a photograph of the Pleasant Valley area. On Monday, there was construction traffic going on there, so I have a photograph for that. What is the rule when I submit material to you in terms of allowing the public also to see it?
I don't think that would be available for the public.
So it will be publicly available after the conclusion of the meeting. So we're not prepared to provide the next meeting.
All right, very good. Thank you. Then I will submit to you one copy and reserve one for my own records. And then I also have a copy of a site on the road where there was storm damage on Pleasant Valley Road that is not repaired. Those are for yours. Thank you very much. And then my final document to submit is a copy of the September 9th, 2015 Highlander, a newsletter for the Bonnie Doon community, where they are discussing the rollout of the code modernization and that affects this issue that we're talking about today. Thank you. My name is Becky Steinbrenner. I did appeal this issue, and I appealed it because I saw in January how I got involved in it when I saw the announcement in the Register Pajaroni about the environmental comment time on the environmental review. And that's what got me interested in it, because my family bicycles frequently out in those wonderful, beautiful country roads. And I really felt this use could affect my family's safety. So I did comment, and I did ask to be kept informed. I wasn't really kept informed, and I did ask questions about whether the barn had permits. I looked at some of the documents on the planning website and didn't see that any permits, but I know there have been a lot of land divisions, so I know those things get tossed around. I filed the appeal because at the end of the zoning administrative hearing on April 21st, it was clear to me that the community did not know about this. And I would like to give Mr. Gant here, who does live on Pleasant Valley Road, some time. I hope you will allow him extra time. And he was very upset, and that was one of the most confusing zoning administrative hearings I've ever been to. Information was confusing, and the results were confusing. So that's why I filed the appeal, because I really felt there were errors made, and that's why my letter of May 4th is about trying to establish that there were errors made, because Mr. Bush at the planning department told me that that was the only way that appeal fees could be reduced or waived. And I'm on a very limited budget, as a lot of people are, but I really felt that out of concern for the community, this needed to be addressed. So we did hold a public meeting, a community meeting at the Aptos Library. It was well attended, and I hope that you've heard from some of those people. Some of them that could be here today and have been able to wait this morning may be able to speak with you later. I'm going to go quickly because I see I'm almost out of time. I just want to point out that there was an error in the traffic report at the zoning administrative hearing. The peak number, peak hour for the large events of 62 was quoted as being the total maximum, and that's incorrect. I also, it's really hard for me to be here, I'm sorry. I also want to point out that there have been many people say things such as Supervisor Leopold about the implications of this. He said when the county rolled out this idea, I fear that it will have a terrible impact on the quality of life in our neighborhoods. And Supervisor Coonerty also supported that, saying that he really wanted to get commercial events out of the residential neighborhoods. Quickly moving on, I want to speak to the issue of the road. In the 2017, 2018 Public Works Traffic Capital Improvement Plan, Pleasant Valley and Hames Road are not mentioned. Not in the immediate area time, and not in the 5-year out unprogrammed. There is no money and no plan to maintain Pleasant Valley. The parking is going to be inadequate because it was, as I believe, based on the incorrect number of traffic counts, and will cause additional stormwater runoff into the area. The area below this large event center was changed. The building envelope in 2009 was changed because there is a debris flow, and saturating that slope could exacerbate that. Is it possible for me to get 2 more minutes?
Can you wind it up in a minute and a half?
I will do my best, thank you. The noise study in the use permit, I see that on here it didn't talk about amplified outdoor sound. It calls it live bands, but this is amplified music. And I want to point out that the noise mitigations are applicable only to construction. And in Sheriff Hart's letter to the board regarding the noise ordinance, he stated that of 5,815 calls in 2014, 2,000 were responding to noise and parties. The noise study was done at 11 a.m., not in the evening hours when the amplified music will be allowed. I think enforcing this way of calling the sheriff, and that's what this all predicates on, is people calling the sheriff. It places undue burden on our law enforcement to enforce county codes, and it places a lot of tension within a neighborhood, and that's not a good thing. I just want to also talk about the fire danger and an evacuation in the event of a fire, and there was a large event, and point out lastly that Mr. Safranek from Environmental Health has said that no porta potties would be allowed, and that the water source will primarily be from the well. It's a 5/8 inch connection from Central Water District, but staff from that district has said that, in their opinion, the bulk of the water demand for the event center would come from the private well. And I just want to make a cause for the disturbance in the community, not only to the people, but also the natural habits of the wildlife that are also very important to the ecosystem and to the balance of life and the quality of life that the people who live in these quiet areas like to enjoy. In terms of the noise study, it talks about there's no problem for people with normal sensitivities. People who buy properties out in places like this often buy them because they are sensitive and they need this quiet respite from the stressful modern life.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do other folks present want to speak on the on this issue? Okay. Just identify yourself, please.
Closer to the mic.
Okay. If go ahead and sit down. I'm sorry. I have my handlers here. That we'll have the applicant respond to the appellant, and then we'll take other comments.
Thank you. My name is John Swift, representing the applicant, not the appellant. But so I'd like to start by saying that, clarifying that these events are wine-related events. No one is going to rent this property unless they are attracted to the environment that is there, the vineyards, the wineries. That's how, this is the competitive, so to speak, advantage of this property over any other property, or a beachfront property, or another winery property. It is wine-related. We didn't even think about a condition that would require sales because it's intrinsic. They absolutely want to sell their own wines and will require it of anybody who rents the property, that they must provide wine that utilizes grapes grown on that property. That's absolutely a motivation behind their starting these events. So I think I'm trying to address your concern, and if that's important to put in a condition, we'd absolutely accept that as a condition, because that's our entire intent, is to, support and encourage the consumption of their wine, not in an unresponsible way. It's very tightly regulated, but nonetheless, they're exposing their wine and getting it tasted at these events. I do disagree with Mr. Commissioner Guth a little bit, because I do think staff is correct that the winery ordinance does allow similar uses. We can go through the definition a little bit, and it's kind of a moot point if we make the statutory connection as we have. So I don't want to go into too much detail, but there's a number of things that allowed in the RA zone, the RR zone, such as churches, that we don't specifically say churches can have weddings. We know that they are inherently part of a church operation. We have private clubs that are allowed in the RA zone. tennis courts, golf courses. We know that we expect them to have events associated with them, and we do not explicitly state that. The same is true for wineries, and it's been that way ever since the 70s, that I can remember anyway. Wineries do have events of one size or another. Now, how do we determine how big? We have a level 5 minimum hearing to determine what those conditions would be. So again, it's a slight disagreement with Commissioner Guth. I think both ways get us to that regulatory issue that was raised. Just a difference of opinion. I do want to address specifically the concerns raised by the appellant, and I'm going to go through quickly one by one if I can, because that's really the point of this hearing, it seems to me. But the issue, I just addressed the fact that the code does allow these events in wineries. Let's see. The peak hour traffic, it's alleged that there was a misrepresentation. The point is that peak hour is always the standard one looks at in terms of traffic impacts. That is where the impacted, wow, it's not much time.
No, you have,
What's that?
you have another minute.
Okay, I'll let the traffic engineer deal with that. Adequate parking, the pictures clearly show there is plenty of space. We have delineated plenty of parking. The traffic analysis did review the service and the employees as well. That was alleged that that was not included, it did. Let's see, no events are happening on passport days, so there's no conflict, there's no double counting, so to speak. Fire storage, we met with the fire chief, and clearly we do not need 180,000 gallons of storage. This is not a structure, these events are being held in a field. So we have fire hydrants. I think some of you might have seen, we have fire hydrants, we're connected to central fire. So the issue of water use, all the water consumed in these events will be by bottled water, brought in water. They're not going to be tapping either a well or the district.
2 minutes.
2 more minutes? Okay. I'm going to speak slower. Okay, portable toilets. This is the first thing I've heard that portable toilets will not be allowed. They have used them in the past. Other facilities use them. I don't know where that comes from. So that is the expectation that they would. There'd be no water demand associated with those portable toilets. Let's see. Now, I want to point out, back to my first point, the staff conditions as amended by the ZEA did deal with this connection of the events to the vineyards. It's on page 22 of your staff report, it's condition 4G. And it's not directly as close a connection as maybe we'd like, but I think we can get there. This says, in the event that vineyards are removed and wine ceases to be produced from these vineyards, then all wine tasting, wine-related tasting room special events, and large special events shall immediately cease. So even there's a recognition that there's a direct correlation and connection between the winery, the vineyards, and these events. I would add that we might, I would suggest that we add a condition that says, and these events, wine produced from grapes grown on site will be served at every event and all events. So maybe you want to elaborate on that, but that's the gist, I think, that gets to that point. So I believe my time is up. I think it's not read yet.
Not yet.
So the issue of split.
Just to be clear, you would define with the condition, G might be a place to insert it. Wine produced on site will be served at all levels.
Yeah, you can say served and sold. I mean, they would love to sell their wine. I mean, yeah.
I have proposed language for that later.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. The issue of cumulative events, well, I'll respond to any questions. That may be too much. Okay.
Okay. Any other members of the audience? We'll set it for 3 minutes, okay?
Dear Commissioners, my name is Michael Gant. I reside with my wife at 2226 Pleasant Valley Road, about half a mile above the entrance to the Lester Winery. I supported Becky Steinbrenner's appeal because I felt that the zoning administrator hearing just wasn't adequate. It was not well attended. It was a confusing meeting. And subsequent to that meeting, I found a whole lot of people who had no idea or couldn't make that meeting. I just feel like it really deserves a full, considered hearing, similar to what the first item received. I think it's important that all of you have a chance to hear and then to discuss it, which is why I supported the appeal. I think the main reasons that people are concerned is that Pleasant Valley Road is a dead-end road from Hames. It is unstriped leading up from Hames. It has few shoulders. The shoulders it has are weak. It's a kind of a road that's used by not just cars, but work vehicles, delivery vans, pedestrians, dog walkers, cyclists, and wildlife. And there are many, many times when it is quite narrow, and particularly with pedestrians and cars. And I think that is an issue. A lot of the shoulder is, what there is eroding away. I don't know how much the county is prepared to fix that. I did hear something for the first time that there's some indication that maintenance will be done. That's what you indicated?
Yeah, Public Works has
Public Works would,
this and identified areas that they'll be doing some improvements.
So that's the first that I've heard that, but I think you need to consider that continued and extra traffic is going to require more and more need for the county to step up and do maintenance on that road. Also, Hames Road is coming over from Freedom, a two-lane road, and it has a lane and everything, but it has no shoulders for most of its distance. Noise is a consideration. Music can move around in all kinds of ways, and you often hear music that you don't know where it's coming from. But I think the largest issue, and this is what Mr. Guth talked about, is this is just one event center possibly, or one set of winery events. What happens when the next one comes along, and the one after that, and the third, and the fourth, maybe as many as 5 or 6? Each one individually may not present that much trouble, but you accumulate them in an area like Pleasant Valley. How do you decide when is enough? And do you set a precedent here, and so that the next person says, they got the permit, why can't I have the same permit? And it keeps going, and you lose track of the planning process. The facts on the ground obviate any of your planning purposes. I also think tying it to wine sales for large outdoor events is a very tenuous connection. You could turn into the Mountain Winery, sell some wine, and have large concerts every weekend. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Who is next?
Hello, my name is Mark Weileman, and I'm a 19-year resident of Pleasant Valley. I live at 31 Oak Tree Lane, directly south of the property. And I guess the first question I'd ask is, why does it require those speakers to be aimed directly at my house? And maybe if the acoustician is here, you could ask them that question. It seems obvious that it should go north right into the mountainside and into all the trees, but then I'm only a music teacher. My next concern is traffic. I mean, that's my only concern, actually. When this all takes place, I will probably join the wine club, and I will probably go and taste wine. I love to drink wine. I belong to Alfaro's. I drink at Nicholson all the time. I will probably join this club also. But I have great concern about requiring people to come to a party and drink wine until 9 o'clock and then drive on our road. You had some nice pictures of our road, but you failed to take the picture of the blind corner that's a quarter mile up from Hames Road. If you went out there, and it sounds like several of you did on Friday, you went by that curve in the road. It may be small, but it's completely blind, and if it's 20 feet, I'm 12 years old. Okay, there is a telephone pole on one side and a culvert on the other side. I have hit the culvert trying to dodge somebody going out. If you don't take into account this section of that road, there's going to be a problem there, and I guarantee you between 9 and 10 o'clock in the next year, someone's going to have a big problem. I just hope it's not me. That's my biggest concern. I guess I also share the concern that there are 5 or 6 other wineries. How do you say no to them if you say yes to these guys? Music-wise, I mean, every once in a while they have events now, and I usually don't mind the music coming across the valley. I hear it quite well at my house. That's not my concern really. But I think your safety issues are what you should be paying attention to. And if you do not, you are going to regret it. As far as county doing any work on the road, they did it on Monday. They put in 10 new reflective panels to show you how skinny the road is in that corner right there. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the
Sorry about that. My name is Steve Johnson. What I want to say is over the course of the last 2 weeks, you've seen tons of signs of protest against this project. The protest has been one of fear of the future, what can happen in Pleasant Valley. But the problem is the fear that they have has been happening over the last 20 years. We've had 30 events, or excuse me, 60 events on the property. And in that course of 60 events, there has not been one problem reported to the county or to us. None of it. And when I go back and take a look at the signs that have been out there, this sign's been sitting out in front of our property. It's been sitting there for all those 60 events. So if there was a problem,
Show the sign.
so if there's a problem, you could have easily just pinpointed where that problem is coming from. Very easily call the sheriff and let them know that, hey, these guys are making too much noise, or there's just too much traffic on the road as a result of the events we've had out there. Lastly, I want to say is that I read the letters of protest that have come through. All of them have a common theme. It's all about future problems or future fear of what's going to happen. They also say, you know what? We like it in Pleasant Valley now. We like it the way it is. We don't want to change it. We want the ambience to be the same. And with regard to that, I'm in agreement with that. Let's keep it the same way it's been for the last 15 or 20 years. Obviously, the impact that we've made in the valley has been very minimal.
thank you.
My name is Joe Miller, and for over 40 years I was a professor of astronomy at UC Santa Cruz, and also during that time I taught courses on wine appreciation, on wineries, and on wine of the world, and I want to give you just a different perspective. I specialized in the end on teaching about the wines of Burgundy in France. The great Burgundy vineyards, which are classified as Grand Cru, constitute less than 2,000 acres in France. They constitute less than 2,000 acres in the whole world that can produce great Pinot Noir. Based on 40 years of making wine from all over this state, I can say that the Lester family vineyard is the finest Pinot Noir vineyard I've seen in California and ranks with the Grand Cru. In the world scene, it is among the few thousand acres in all of Europe and all of the Western Hemisphere that can produce Pinot Noir like that. It is really almost scary how good it is. I think this is a good comprehensive plan for 5 different parcels that unites them and puts them under a common theme. My expectation is, from past experience, fears about traffic, though real, fears about congestion, though real, can be mitigated, are being mitigated, and have not been a problem under similar events. The biggest problem with owning a winery, and I own a winery, and I do have a tasting room, and I do have a wine club with events, the biggest problem is not making wine, it is selling wine. With thousands of wineries in competition, no matter how good your wine is, the word has to get out. Tasting rooms play an important role in that, and I feel that in the case of the Lester family vineyard, a tasting room will augment the income that could be received from that vineyard, which I'm sure does not make money. And I feel these events, these special events, are part of the whole picture of promulgating, of propagating fine wine being produced in California. So in conclusion, I would say this is a unique opportunity to create a well-planned, comprehensive, and I would say rather modest in its goals, situation that will preserve one of the finest vineyards in California. It will be in the long run, be seen as an international resource, an international treasure, well beyond California. This may seem like an extreme statement, but all I can say is I've been doing this for 40 years, and I've tasted thousands of wines and tens of thousands of wines, and this is really a special, unique thing. I'm not saying other places in Pleasant Valley aren't as good, but I'm saying what you have to do today is decide about this particular proposal and what to do with it. And in conclusion, let me just say, I have no economic connection to this, other than I want to keep buying some of their grapes, but it's no economic stake for me.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Megan Metz. I'm the Executive Director for the Santa Cruz Mountain Wine Growers Association, and I want to talk a little bit about events. So 50 individuals under one roof, that's about the size of this room. And all of you in here, there's 50 of us. So let's talk about events. It's not very impactful. I've been doing events for the last 25 years. I've done events that, brought 3,600 people to downtown Santa Cruz to basically elevate this community, and it was all local based. The wine region here in the Santa Cruz Mountains, especially in Santa Cruz County, and I just want to educate a lot of people in this room, we only have 1,500 acres of planted grapes in this region, which goes all the way from Half Moon Bay all the way down to Watsonville. It is a blip on the dot of what we do and what size of a region is compared to what's out there in the rest of the marketplace. This is a very local wine community. The Lessers have been here forever. A lot of my vineyards and wineries have been here forever. So this is a very local, community-based wine community. We aren't bringing in throngs of people from the rest of the United States or even Europe. It's our community that basically individually supports this wine industry. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and I also wanted to just let you know about events. It's a small impact. This isn't 200 people or 300 people that we're having to come congregate under one roof. It's 50 people. It's all 50 of us in the same room. Celebrating a wedding, celebrating whatever it may be of what that event is, but so I hope that you deny the appeal and you move forward and let the Lesser family basically do business. Thank you.
Thank you. She was next.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Alloy. I live on Pleasant Valley Road. I've never done this before. I sent an email to all the planning commissioners and the project planner. I would never have known about this thing going on if there hadn't been this appeal, whatever. And also I walk on that road and I saw a sign finally about the June 14th, but I'd never heard of it before that. And I live right on the street. I guess my understanding is that the winery has been doing these events at this kind of frequency and have had no complaints. And so I'm wondering, why are they doing it? Why are they requesting this officially if it's been going on fine without any problems? And it would really help to know the reason why for me. And also the thing, just observing the skydiving one is like, if you say yes to something, it's much harder to ever say no or restrict. And there are the other wineries in the area. I've been living there for 20 years. I love the area, and the roads are terrible. They're just terrible. And even when I'm walking and so public safety cars, just two cars cannot both go. They have to wait for the other car to go. And that's just cars, that's not trucks. So I'm concerned about it. I'm glad they addressed the water use. I see that that's not going to be an issue, and the portable toilets, if that's going to happen. So I appreciate even having this opportunity and being able to observe the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, excuse me, I'm Brad Asmus. I live on Light Springs Road, which is a mile up from the Lester property. I live right next to an existing vineyard and winery, and wineries are noisy neighbors. But I don't have a complaint about their request to establish the winery. I think that's one of the things that you kind of got to live with when you go out to an agricultural area like this. But I'm not into the idea of the weddings. You know, even if you tie the weddings to wine sales, it's the most tenuous connection. And of course, you won't have the Mormons or the Muslims having their weddings there. But I do think that, you know, the whole idea of having ancillary activities to agriculture goes back to Prop J. And Prop J was about making sure that farmers could farm, the right to farm. And there's nothing in there about, you know, I think having, you know, selling your produce, that's ancillary to agriculture. Making wine, that's ancillary to agriculture. Processing your apples, that's ancillary. Weddings and events are not ancillary. Those are completely different things. Yeah, they add to the income stream, but, you know, tell you the truth, I got a 12-acre property out there, beautiful view of the valley. I got olives all over my property. It'd be a great place for me to have weddings, and, you know, it would increase the value of my property probably if I had, you know, a processing facility and weddings. But I don't think that's the appropriate use. I think that changes the nature of Pleasant Valley. It's an agricultural residential area, and when you start allowing multiple events, it starts to get, you know, it really changes the complexion. Let me just give you an anecdote from this week. My neighbor had an event at their winery property, and they had live music. It was, you know, it was kind of noisy for a while, but it wasn't a bother until just before 11 o'clock. And 11 o'clock, it was a bother. And so I called down there and I said, hey, you guys are making too much noise. And the noise stopped, you know, the banging of the tables and the people laughing, you know, as they're putting away glasses and stuff. But I got a call from the neighbor the next morning scolding me for calling and complaining about it. And they told me that they're going to have a wedding there's a wedding coming up in August, and they hoped, kind of like Donald Trump, that I wasn't going to complain about that. So, you know, it can be a burden to the neighbor. You talked about burdens to the neighborhood. I hope we don't just, you know, put this burden on the neighbors. And when you look at, you know, how nice you were to the folks in Calabasas, the restrictions you put on the skydiver guys, you know, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask you to eliminate the idea of weddings and large events. Thanks.
Thank you. It's 20 minutes until 1, I think. And remember, we're going to break at 1 o'clock for lunch.
Marilyn Garrett. I live on Redwood Heights Road off of Freedom Boulevard, and I'm familiar with the area, and my daughter and son-in-law also live off of Haines. I'm thinking of the original opening statements of Commissioner Guth that we don't allow event centers on wine parcels, and I think it's critical to follow what the language of the code is. And also you gave a statement of Supervisor Coonerty that wants to get commercial events out of residential neighborhoods, and I agree with that. Freedom Boulevard, I'm very familiar with the traffic there that can be just incredible. There are quite a few accidents in that area. There was one by Day Valley and Freedom just before you go up to Hames, crashing into a pole. I mean, just lots of accidents, lots of speeding in that area. The roads are not suitable for this huge increase, so I think we have serious safety accident problems that are clearly on the horizon, and to approve this, I think will increase it. I have to give a disclaimer here. I don't drink. I have never been drunk in my life. I don't like to be around drunk people. And so the proliferating wine in this county and the accidents that are associated with drunk driving, I think is another huge problem. Agricultural parcels, I can see for providing food, organic food. I'm curious if this is an organic orchard because there are a lot of pesticides associated with vineyards. Water is an issue as the terrain is, the normal habitat is disrupted and torn up for grapes everywhere. This impacts negatively wildlife. I have a teacher friend who's an organic farmer, and he's next to a vineyard, and his water supply at his well has decreased greatly since that vineyard went in, so there are impacts, I understand, with water. And I don't want this area. I've lived in the area 36 years. It's like a Silicon Valley approach I'm getting with big developments, with the traffic on, with these huge events out on this land. And I also like to say, when the applicants talk about fear, 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 that's a dismissive term. We're talking about problems here and about maintaining a quality of life and not harming the neighbors by certain activities for profit of other neighbors. We want to, I mean, I can say I've seen the area degraded tremendously since I moved out there in 81. 82, and I think that's about it. I would like to see this project denied, personally.
Thank you for taking the extra time to hear us. My name is Prudy Fox. I'm the viticulturist for the Lester Family Vineyard, and also for all of the vineyards actually that are on Pleasant Valley Road. So if you want to know information about how those vineyards are handled and how they're farmed, I would be the person to talk to. I'm a former agricultural biologist with the Agricultural Commissioner's Office. I'm extremely familiar with pesticide use. To answer your question, Marilyn, very quickly, there are significant organic and sustainable practices at Lester Family Vineyards. There have never been herbicides on the property, and we are drip irrigated and have an extremely minimal amount of water use. I really wanted to jump in looking at this area historically. Pleasant Valley and Corralitos has a long agricultural history that has gone from the production of apples, berries, and Christmas tree farming to now grapes, olive, and other small-scale organic family farms that do sell products out of their home use in their buildings. In the past, Lester Family Vineyards was actually a Christmas tree farm, and people came every winter and bought Christmas trees. And Silva Apples had a major apple cider business right up there off of Haines Road. So the idea of selling your produce out of your home production industry is not a new one, and especially not a new one to this area. So I'm very surprised to hear some of the concerns. I realize there's always more of us, and hopefully we've improved traffic patterns and roads, safety of cars, all kinds of things that go with simply having a higher population, but having commercial endeavors coming out of the production of our agricultural community is nothing new. I also was concerned about the people expressing concern about the 6 other vineyards that are on the road. They're actually vineyards. There's Nicholson Winery. That's it right now. And when I look at the other vineyards, I really want to express the Lester Family Vineyard is 190 acres. None of the other vineyards comes close to attracting that size. I know at the public meeting, Christie Vineyards was brought up. Even that parcel does not come close to that size, does not accommodate parking, does not have anywhere near the built-in infrastructure to support what we're talking about. So I think the Lester family has exhibited stewardship of the earth, and I'm really proud to be part of their operation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fox.
Good afternoon now. My name is Gerald O'Brien. I'm a founder, owner, operator of Silver Mountain Vineyards, of which staff has referred to earlier in comparison with Regale. I have to correct you. Silver Mountain is in many ways twice as large as Regale, not smaller than Regale, in a number of different measurements. I've been there, founded, operating for 39 years. I'm the senior winemaker owner in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I've also, unfortunately, been dealing with the county for 44 years, reference permits. I've been in this room too many times. All the way from the era of Gary Patton and the head in the sand attitude of the planning department to our current, much more open, liberal, pragmatic philosophy as influenced by, suggested by John Leopold, Bruce McPherson, and some of the other forward-thinking supervisors. I'd like to say over the years I've had a number of experiences, as I mentioned, and I can tell you something about some of my experiences. In 1991, I was involved in a public hearing for a permit to expand my business. There was a neighbor, you could say the neighbor in quotes, because he was about 4 or 5 parcels away, was not nowhere near immediate neighbor. He organized some immediate neighbors, and he was prone to do that because he was a practicing litigation attorney with a large ego, liked to organize people at these settings. Okay. It was a mass force against me. I was still approved for some items. Within the years following, virtually all of those people who were against me came back and said, "We're so apologetic for giving you so much trouble and saying so many nasty things about you." So the times changed. I mean, they did not understand what was going on before the neighbors came and voted. Another situation was, in fact, there was a sound study done for me by Mr. Pack a number of years ago that showed that, one with music in our facility, showed that the loudest noise at the perimeter all around the property was not the music, was not the noise of the winery, but the noise of a neighbor's pool pump. True study. It was, okay. I just hope, one last question, that you folks realize there's always going to be NIMBYs all the way around, and you have a responsibility to represent the majority. Thank you.
Thank you. We have only 8 more minutes, so go ahead.
My name is Paul Sanders. I'm a 40-year resident of Santa Cruz County, currently teach at Cabrillo College. My first experience with the Lester Family Vineyard was 12 years ago when they hosted my wife Sue and I's engagement party. I've conducted a wedding there of one of the Lester boys, and I've been to Mr. Lester, Dan Lester's, the patriarch's funeral. It's a wonderful piece of property, and you stand there, if you haven't seen it, it's rolling vineyards and Tuscan, a thing of beauty. And in my experience of 12 years of going to events there and parties there and graduation parties and grandkids, and this is what we do as human beings. We gather and we celebrate life. And there are many reasons to say, no, you can't do that because I live close by, and what about the slippery slope argument? But in my experience of 12 years, I just say anecdotally, it's the Lester Family Vineyard. And my take on their motivation is they know they have a slice of heaven and they want to share it. And they do a great job of that. And that to me is a very important part of this. I've been to wine events, and unlike many people that spoke, I don't even like them. I don't like wine that much, and they're boring. You stand around like this with your glass of wine, and there's wooden music in the background, and I've never seen any traffic issues. They have tons of parking up there. So I think many of the arguments put forth are unfounded. And it's a family vineyard, and they're very true to that.
Thank you. Oh, there were 3 people in the back standing, so if you're... Oh.
I originally thought that I was going to be able to tell you good morning when I came up here and spoke. As it is, good afternoon. My name is Melanie Benedetti. My husband is John Benedetti, and together we own Sante Arcangeli Family Wines. We are Corralitos residents. We live down the street from Pleasant Valley, and we're here in support of the Lester Family Vineyard property development. We've had the pleasure of hosting a couple of events at their location, and I'd like to second the prior speaker's experience that it is a life-changing experience to be able to go there and spend an afternoon enjoying yourself there. And when I say that, we've hosted wine events, and I can tell you we've had small children playing on the lawn, playing t-ball. I've witnessed my friend's newborn baby being nursed on a blanket on the lawn. These are life-enriching memories. And so I feel it would be wonderful if this could be shared with other people in our community. And so I think we need to look at the ability to further local business. They're doing it in a tasteful manner. I mean, when we were there, we had a single guitarist strumming music. I doubt that went further than the middle of the vineyard, because it's so encapsulated in the site that it's in. It's a cradle, basically. If you're there on the lawn, you're cradled by the whole environment. And so, as a small local business, and with what we've had to deal with our own winery, I would just really ask for your approval and support of their development at their property. I think it's going to be something that benefits Santa Cruz County as a whole on many different levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have time for only one more speaker.
How about shorten it to 1 minute each so we can all get...
You can speak, we're just going to take a break for lunch. This is our second appeal.
Okay, we can, just 2 minutes per person, so maybe we can get through this. Right.
Hi, my name is Chris Willoughby. I live at 700 Del Valle with my wife and 2 girls, and we fully support the project. We can't wait to go there. We've never been impacted by sound from them, and we live directly adjacent to their property. So there will be no issue as far as sound. Traffic as well has never been an issue. The cars pass easily in all areas. There is one slight line turn, but it's fine. Everybody goes slow around it. So, but we fully support it. Can't wait to go, and there you have it. Thanks.
I'm John Hickey. I live at 3100 Pleasant Valley Road.
I'm sorry, what was your name, last name?
John Hickey.
Hickey, thank you.
Yeah. And all I was going to say is, yes, my wife and I jog up and down Pleasant Valley every day. I think you've heard we have some road maintenance issues, but the traffic comes regardless. And my 3 sons bike up and down the road, and it is a nice place out that way, so I don't know if, never noticed any more traffic with their events. And I know, just to address the slippery slope of, and I know Ms. Fox talked about this, I can't think of another property, maybe there is one, that's out there that has the capacity to deal with these events. And if you're worried about this happening across the county, I'd say pick spots where it's really appropriate, where it's in an environment where it's insulated enough from from the other neighbors and everybody else concerned, so that people can have weddings and funerals and other life events in a great setting that doesn't bother everybody. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Deborah Hinkey from Bonnie Doon. And I got involved in this because of code modernization, because I live next door to a winery. I do want to point out, I cannot find anywhere in the revised conditions where it says you can't have wine tasting during any of the events. Wine tasting is in a different set. If you look at page 21, you'll see where it talks about when you have small events, but it does not say you cannot have wine tasting. Page 20 also, tasting rooms events are prohibited during large events. That's the only prohibition that I found in here. And then all wine tasting guest vehicles must be off premises by 6 p.m. If you're allowing large events to go until 9 p.m., you can't differentiate by experience who's there at 6 and who's there at 9. I do, and I'm acutely aware of the difference between agriculture and wineries, and the difference is the manufacturing part of it. You have 5 days a week where you're listening to forklifts, trucks, supplies of bottles, labels, storage, mixing up the barrels, moving them forward, upkeep of the property, which includes chainsaws, weed whackers, and leaf blowers. 5:30 a.m. pickups for recycling bottles. There's 5 days a week you're impacted, and now you're asking the community to put up with weekends also, so it's 7 days of constant input. You never know what noise is coming next, and I know the community, it doesn't sound like the winery is in production, it sounds like it's going to come. So I really hope that you would consider the impact of commercializing our neighborhoods. The Lesters sound like fabulous people. It sounds like a beautiful property. I'm not opposed to that. What I'm opposed to is the commercialization of the property, and that is the large events. The small events, you've got pickup parties, you've got passport days, they're the same. Thank you.
Thank you, and it is now 1 o'clock.
Chair, we're a half hour past our anticipated break.
I'm going to have to say that this is it, because we have been here even as long as you have. So we'll be back at 1:45.
Nice talk, 20 years. We've never heard any sounds come from the events at their property. And they live, these are not absentee landlords. They actually live in the neighborhood, they live in the property. And they are concerned about being good neighbors. And we couldn't ask for better neighbors.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our son and our daughter married on this amazing piece of property. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe there are any complaints concerning traffic or noise. The Lester family has always had their own set of regimented rules and regulations that all guests have to abide by, even close family friends. They've always kept the best interests of their neighbors in mind when hosting any event, both large and small. Being a practicing architect, I've had the opportunity to have a number of projects go through the county's strenuous review and approval process. I haven't always agreed with the requirements, including the hiring of experts to analyze, review, and report on every facet of a project during the preliminary approval phases. But I've grown to appreciate this kind of scrutiny that ensures the project meets the most current codes and ordinances, as well as protecting the neighbors. Please don't be swayed to second guess the county's review process and their previous decisions and approvals. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Gary Nolan. I live at 1375 Hames Road, have for a number of years. My comments are really geared towards going back to when this discussion item first opened up, Commissioner Goose comments regarding the conflation of winery activities with event centers. According to his discussion, an event center is really outside the bounds of the current winery and wine operations codes. So if this kind of thing is going to happen, I think that code needs to be revisited if you're going to add that in as a permitted use. That just gets to the larger issue, also pointed out by Commissioner Guth, of this particular and specific area in this valley. As he noted, there are a number of other properties that could potentially also put in applications for event centers. And that gets into even the bigger issue of the code modernization issue that's going on. This area, if it is in fact going to be authorized to have these kind of event centers, then that needs to be incorporated in that process, and there needs to be a total carrying capacity identified for that area for this type of activity. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Walter Hickey. I reside directly across the property from the Lester property on Del Valle. So we're direct neighbors. I've been there 25 years, been in the county 50 years, in Corralitos 40 years. And we've been there during any family parties the Lesters had. I've been to a couple of them. And there's no noise coming that's disturbing to me or my family or my guests. The traffic on the road, I'm 25 years living there, I've observed all the traffic conditions. And there's been no surprises of lines of cars going to any of the other vineyards having wine tastings or the Lester property. Typically, yep, I leave the house, go down the road. There might be another car that I might pass, two at the most. As far as bicycle traffic, there's virtually no bicycle traffic. There's a couple of bikes you might see in a week. It's not a bicycle thoroughfare because it's a dead-end road, and as soon as you get to the Lester property, you're walking your bike up the hill. It's pretty steep. I hear this characterized as an event center. I don't see it as an event center. It's a place where people can go to do wine tasting in a group setting and celebrate activity in the valley. I think the character of the valley is pretty much the same as it's been for the whole 25 years I've been there. Some of the old tired apple orchards have been converted to other uses, other ag uses, and I like that. So I hope you will approve the project as approved by the zoning administrator. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address this issue? If not, I will, excuse me, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring this back to the commission for discussion.
Well, one of the items that I'm most interested in is the status of the traffic in that area. And I understood that the traffic engineer would be here to answer questions. Great. Hello. Could you describe how to...
Identification for the record.
Let him identify.
Yeah, so my name is Frederick Venter with Kim Leon, and I prepared the traffic analysis.
Oh, okay. I understand. I was looking for somebody from Public Works, but I'd love to hear from you too. In terms of the Pleasant Valley Road condition, the condition of that road, we've heard several comments this morning. Is that something that you can fill us in about?
I can talk about more the traffic operations on the road, but the physical condition is probably Jack, and Jack was here already left. But so there will be standard maintenance on these roads that the county is supposed to do. The road is 20 feet wide. We heard between 20 and 24 feet, and there's some curves. It's hillside, so that's the typical geometry that you're going to see. The nice thing about the narrow road is it slows the traffic down. If you're going to start adding shoulders and make the lanes wider, people are going to start speeding on it, and you know, inevitably more people may drive on it. Mm-hmm. The real big benefit here is that the road is actually a dead end. So we have a slide that shows some of the volumes, and that I would like to share that with you. It's an eye-opener. So we did some counts, and it was done over 24 hours last year, over 3 days. So we counted a Thursday, a Friday, a Thursday, Friday, a Saturday, which was a passport Saturday, and a Sunday. So we said, let's try and capture all the different conditions that we could experience on the road, a typical day and more the busier day as well. And there's a graph in the actual traffic study as well that indicates what happens. And here we go. That's the one, thank you. So there are a couple of lines on this graph, and I'm just going to walk you through them. So the Friday one is the blue one. And it shows that the morning peak is about 71 cars and 79 in the afternoon peak. Okay, so that is about a car a minute. So I can stand back and we can wait 1 minute and we're going to get a vroom. Okay. It's really, really almost nothing. Then if you look at the orange line was for the Thursday, it's even lower, right? So that would be a typical day. And then there was a Saturday line, which is the green line. And there you can see how the peak goes up, and the peaks are slightly different from what you would expect on a typical workday, but it is higher. And then, the passport Saturday was the red one. So that shows you when it gets busy, and it's around before noon and just afternoon, so people come and they may eat and they may do an event and taste some wine and leave. So at the peak, we're seeing 90 to 91 cars, so it's about 20 more, but that's about a car and a half a minute. So I can stand back and we can wait 1.5 minutes, you can see still 1.5 cars go by. With the addition of the project traffic, the worst case with a special event is another 60 cars in that peak hour, and it will go way down to 10 on a typical wine tasting day, 16 with the smaller events. So we still, in terms of level of service, which the county likes to look at, we are the best aid that you can probably get, and it's really just because it's a dead-end road.
Okay.
Hope that helps a bit.
Yes. Can you comment any on, I understand those are in terms of traffic, but in terms of the condition of the road itself? Do you have any comments on that?
So the condition of the road, well, I haven't been there after the storms, but we do know, well, every single road in the county has been severely impacted. We heard this morning from that Public Works is planning to upgrade the road and do some maintenance. And, Jack's actually here. So
great. Okay, thank you so much.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Jack Sprakoff, Public Works.
Thanks for coming, Jack.
Sure.
I just had some questions about the conditions of Pleasant Valley Road itself, and several people mentioned this morning that perhaps Public Works had some plans in mind for improvements to the road.
Well, we've already sent out some work orders to do some delineation with some reflectors, some brush removal, clean out of some drains, the drainage swale along the road, and there is some erosion issues along the road, but when we get to those, we get to those. We have like 185 storm damage sites right now, so it's a priority issue.
Is the delineation side or center?
You'd be side,
yeah,
around those problem areas.
So there would be no expectation to ever center stripe?
No.
Do you have any concerns about emergency vehicles and access on that road?
Not at all.
In Pleasure Point, we did the code thing to not force or not have any center striping on the small roads. The thinking at that time was that if it looks small, people go slow. And then we've just heard that from the traffic consultant. Do you share that view that traffic is calmed by not having center lines?
Residents, usually in residential areas, don't want centerline striping because they think it's a major road, and they think drivers treat it as such. We do have narrow roads, so we have limits on when we do put a centerline in. I don't know if this one meets that or not.
I'm not suggesting we do. I actually think I agree with the consultant that it's calming. I just wanted to know if that was our Public Works traffic view too.
It is. Okay, it is.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
I also had some questions for the noise consultant, if they're still here.
Good afternoon, I'm Jeff Beck.
Good afternoon. I saw several different mentions of acoustical, amplified, live music. I see that there are some conditions that for the wine tasting and the small events that there be just acoustical music, but that for the larger events, it's amplified music. Can you describe a little bit more of the differences in those?
Okay, I didn't analyze the wine tasting area. My study was focused mostly on the large events, particularly wedding receptions, which would incorporate either a DJ or a live band. Acoustic music, by nature, has a tendency to be softer, more mellow music for wine tasting, small, intimate, more gatherings, background type of music.
Is acoustical considered non-electrical? Is that a correct definition?
Well, there's such a mix with things. You look at, you say acoustical music, you might have someone with a small electric piano. So that's quote unquote not acoustic, it's electric, but it's still being played softly. So I think the term acoustic music means soft background type of music, not high powered, electric guitars, rock and roll, things like that.
And so for the large events, which you did do some studies for, that was mostly assuming it would be amplified music for the large events.
Yes, like you'd see at any typical wedding reception with a DJ or a live band.
And you concluded that the noise levels around the perimeter of the property were consistent with the county standards for those.
That's correct. And I did two scenarios. I have a very high-powered music system that I use for live bands and DJs, and I'm also a musician. We set it up at the existing event area where the pergola is at the lawn, and we face the speakers south, typical what they would do now. And we blasted the music, a couple different styles, and measured all around the property. And then we set up in what they call the future event area, which is just to the east of that. We've turned the speakers to face north, so we could see what is the difference if they decided to play the music towards the north instead of to the south. And we mapped that as well using the same program material. And that's all outlined in the sound report. And in both cases, they meet the sound criteria of the county.
But you're recommending that they be oriented to the south?
I didn't make any recommendation either way. It's whatever they choose to do. If they want to use the existing stage now, that's fine. If they decide to use it in another location and turn it the other way, that's fine too.
That's my questions.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Other discussion?
I have some comments. I want to thank everybody who went in and testified. It's a long hearing, and I appreciate hearing from people and for the people who also mailed in. One of the things I just kind of want to refresh us on, and this has to do with wineries. This is a discretionary application to get above what are the default limits for a winery. And I'll just, in case we haven't really said it, default limit for a winery is private tasting, 12-person maximum, and sale of wine limited to wine made and bottled on site. So it's a state bottle, and this isn't that. So they actually need approval for that. So when they're not asking for, so we do allow events on site so people can promote their wines and have visitors, but it's 12 persons maximum at any one time. So I'll just say I grew up in Saratoga, and I've probably done every vineyard and winery job that there is at one point or another in my young life. And well, I'm not young now, when I was young. And only one of the vineyards that I worked at a winery that had a large congregation area, much smaller than this. And most of the vineyards that I worked didn't have a winery on site. And I mean, I worked at Catherine Kennedy, and it was a very prominent label. And they did have private wine tasting, 6-person maximum. So this goes to what Mr. Swift said about, what's inherent in in a winery, and I don't view hosting big events as an inherent part of winery operation. And because we're talking about what's inherently part of a church and things. So my experience is a little different. And also, I mean, in the eclectic wineries that I worked on in the Saratoga side of the hill, they were fully sold every year before, you know, they didn't have to actually entertain that much marketing on their own. So I wanted to hear people to hear what the default limits. And then I have another question, which is, and this is for staff, the parcel size. We have code limits that say parcel size, different, you know, 10 acres, there's different. Did you aggregate the parcels, or did you use just the one that it was on?
I aggregated it. It's 192 acres approximately.
And I don't think it would make any difference if you had just used the small parcel it was on, but is that your feeling also?
I don't, currently there's no minimum lot size required.
We could approve it either way, but I'm just wondering for the record, is a 10 acre, is this lot to less than 10 acres that the winery work is on?
That is at least 10 acres. I
Okay.
think I could double check the plans.
It's just a question about when you have aggregate lots, which is very unusual. Okay, no, if you feel it's that's my view just from looking at the relative sizes.
It's approximately, see, parcel A.
Yeah.
29 acres. The smallest parcel is 19 acres, and that would be down this area here.
Very good, thank you for that.
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking that is our code has different thresholds for different acre sizes. This is a very big one, which, for example, if people are trying to put an operation like this on a 2.5 acre parcel, it presents a whole host of problems that this large parcel does not. I want to mention something about, I appreciate getting the information to people that there's not a history of complaints that they're aware of. But I do want to comment that just because there hasn't been complaints given to the owners and things, it doesn't mean that it hasn't been bothersome to people. There are things in my neighborhood that bother me that I haven't gotten a complaint to people yet, you know, but sometimes those come out at an opportunity like this when there's a noticed hearing, and it doesn't, so I caution that it doesn't mean it hasn't been impactful. I do agree with the traffic consultant and Strikeoff that in my experience that you don't center stripe roads, you make the road look small so people go slow. One thing I want to clearly go on the record about is that the reason I was mentioning my view is that it has to be a winery event related to wine sales or tasting is because that's a statutory requirement. I'm not trying to force people to drink at events and then drive drunk, absolutely not. I go to things with my friends all the time and I'm the designated driver. I didn't want it to be construed that way, and I can see there's slightly conflicting purpose in what I was saying there. The big thing to me is, do we qualify to be able to go use our discretionary authority to allow larger events than these 12 persons maximum? And if we cross that hurdle, then what's appropriate? I will say that sound study notwithstanding, when I was up there, I sat for quite a while up there until cars went by and trucks went by. I can actually hear them on the road down there. So I've been on a lot of sites where people are worried about noises. This is a bigger site than, more removed from what I consider the potentially impacted parties from noise than we normally deal with. So I don't see such a big noise issue there, but what I want to make clear is this, is that, look, there's simply no vested right for people to get discretionary permits for something like this. And if I were to vote for this one, I want to make it clear that there are certainly going to be other cases in wineries where this is not an appropriate extension beyond the defaults. This is a wide open property that's in a pretty big area, and I completely appreciate the sincere comments of neighbors saying that the road has got issues, but we've got a traffic consultant whose integrity I don't doubt, and our county traffic engineer who's been around a long time and never had reason to doubt that this road isn't that big of a problem at this, or isn't a problem at this level of use. But I'll just repeat, there's no, people should not have an expectation that this is an easy permit to get. And the dead end road, the low traffic on the road already and the expansive nature of the property speak to its favor. And I don't know what a motion would be or what, but I'll leave it at that. That's where I am.
Thank you. I would just like to thank, I think the public hearing is closed right now.
I know, but is there going to be a rebuttal?
It's, actually, I'd have to.
I'm just asking a point of order.
Stop talking.
Thank you.
Did you want one, and how long do you think it would take you?
Yes, I would like a rebuttal of 5 minutes. Maximum.
Well, just a minute. Okay, 3 minutes?
3 minutes. And I'll sit down and let the commissioners finish. You're midstream. I didn't mean to interrupt, but it sounded like it was going to wrap up, and I just know that there should be a rebuttal. I've been to your excellent meetings before. Thank you.
So, well, I mean, I think you have to, no. Right now, I believed that the public hearing was closed. So if you want to allow the appellant to rebut, then you have to reopen the public hearing, let her rebut, and then we'll discuss the issue. Okay. So reopen the public hearing, and
I'll do that for 4 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And I apologize. I meant to ask early on what the process was going to be, but I neglected to do that. So thank you. This is Becky Steinbruner. I am the appellant, and I want to make it clear that the reason I am the appellant and not Mr. Gant or someone from Pleasant Valley is because at the zoning administrative hearing, there were only 2 people there from Pleasant Valley residents who were speaking up with concerns, and Mr. Gant was one of them, and we talked afterwards, and he let me know that he really wanted to appeal it, but he was leaving the country for an extended vacation the next day. So we talked, and I made the agreement that I would help keep the window of appeal open for him so he could organize his community when he returned. So that's an explanation of that. I want to make it very clear that this is not against the Lester family. If there's anything that I've learned in my work in the last 2.5 years observing public policy making and zoning, it's that things happen in decision making that the public's not aware of, but they are very much affected by. And I want to always do all I can to help government be more transparent to the people. And that's why I filed this appeal. The tons of signs on the road that someone referred to were in fact maybe the handmade signs that I made to notify people passing on the road that we were holding a community meeting June 7th at the Aptos Public Library. We paid for it ourselves, we mailed things, but there are always people that you can't reach, so that's what the signs were about. And then another set of signs came up to inform people about the hearing today. They're not fear-mongering. They gave time, place, date, and subject matter. I want to also be very clear that the traffic report that Ms. Daniels said in her April 21st staff report on page 189 in your packet, the graph of that traffic analysis lists 208 cars maximum for a large event, and yet on her staff report, page 8, she said that that there would be 62 maximum additional traffic trips associated with large special events, and I felt that was a misrepresentation of the facts that could have very much influenced the zoning administrator's approval. I also want to address the issue of no porta potties. That is also in your packets, page 139. Comments by Mr. Jim Sofranic of Environmental Health. It said, based on the number of events proposed, portable toilets will not be permitted. I got that from your information. And there's also information about possible redesignation of a private well to a different sort of well. on page 140, and also the need for an enhanced sewage treatment design for the property. That's in your packet as well. And I want to say that what I heard in the zoning administrator's hearing, why this was coming before the zoning administrator, is because the Lester family, and I give them full applause for holding so many charitable events, like the one for hospice that they have planned right now for October, like the local food growing they have planned for sometime this summer. And what they were saying was that they've been doing all these charitable things, and they really needed the large profitable events to help them continue to do that for the community. I understand that it's not cheap to put on events like that, but I think that this is not an appropriate use to ask for in the agricultural area. And according to Barbara Mason in the county's economic development, weddings are the big moneymaker. So that's what it will be. I also want to point out that the noise study did not really analyze voice, amplified voice, for an extended time, or consider the geographical characteristics of the valley and that things echo. Thank you very much for the rebuttal time. I do appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Can we follow up on a question of, is there something in the staff report from someone in the county that says they can't use portable toilets?
So, she is correct. If you look at the smaller number, it's page 139, not the larger number of the report, but the smaller number of page 139. Environmental Health looked at the application twice. The first time through, they said based on the application, the scope of the application, they were precluding porta potties. The second time, they deemed it complete with no such comment. So I'm taking that to mean that porta potties are allowed, and they're based on the applicant's submittal based on the number of people that are attending the event, and they coordinate with environmental health in terms of the number of the porta potties. So it's very common to include porta potties, and they didn't make that comment twice. Had they included a condition prohibiting it, that would have been, I would have followed suit with that, but it's my understanding that it's an allowed use.
So I'm seeing that that's an environmental health comment?
Yes, it's an iterative process, so oftentimes you'll see an initial no pass comments that this isn't acceptable or it's non-compliant based on the information that's provided by the applicant or the scope of the project, and then as things move along, there's always a change.
Well, I see an update, and the update is the first one that says no portable toilets is based August 5th, 2015, and then about 14 weeks later, October 14th, 2015, it comes back, and they're talking about on-site sewage disposal site evaluation, need for an enhanced sewage treatment design, septic system permit design. That doesn't sound like, they may not have repeated the phrasing that portable toilets will not be permitted, but they're clearly into on-site sewage disposal, and that is the last thing I see from environmental health. Is there a spot later that you can show me where they've removed those comments?
Well, their first review on, I guess I'm misunderstanding your dates. Their first review I have is 4/27/2015, where they specifically said they were prohibited. Then the next review I have is August 5th, 2015. And we're pretty clear with the agency reviewers that if they are going to include any restrictions, they include it as conditions of approval once the application is deemed complete. In the absence of stated conditions, they are allowed to include.
On August 5th, though, it does say portable toilets will not be permitted.
That was the first route.
You said that April was the first route.
Yeah, April was the first route.
This is August. This is, so that's the bottom date, the top date, not the bottom date?
So the top date was the first review, and then the bottom date was the second review, and you can see it says routing number 1 and then routing number 2 dated August 5th. So as part of the standard response protocol, they will specifically call out previously stated restrictions if they are to apply to the project. And they didn't do that, so there's no restriction on porta potties in this case.
I hear you saying that, but it does appear to me the way that the second, in the 10-week later input is written, because they're specifically talking about on-site sewage disposal and septic system permits, that they're taking for granted that that's what's going in.
Can we clarify that?
Yeah, Chair, can I ask Mr. Swift up for that, please?
So we have to remember that there's a couple of things happening here. One is the winery. That has always been an issue about the adequate septic system for that winery and the processing of the wine. That is what that comment is about. And in fact, that's one of the reasons we have a 5,000 gallon limitation, is that we don't have enough capacity with the existing system. And to do so, we have to go to an enhanced system, a much more expensive system. So that is what that's all about. The issue of the porta potties was handled just the way Sheila suggests. It was addressed first, and we think that was addressed in terms of a building, an event center with a building, and that was never part of it. It came back through the second time, and porta potties are a commonly allowed use for this kind of somewhat temporary use. Hope that clarifies.
And I could add that if there is a misunderstanding on my part with regard to any restrictions, the conditions that they've placed on routing 2 are included in the conditions of approval. And if it turns out that porta potties are precluded, they're going to hold them to that as a standard. If there's been a misunderstanding, it's not uncommon that that can happen. In which case, then I suppose they would have to revisit the proposed restrooms. They removed those restrooms from the application as a result of the review process. So it's my understanding, would be my guess that they were allowing porta potties. That's why they didn't include it.
I would certainly suggest that we have that clarified, not before a vote, but as a feedback to us, and that it was clearly, I mean, it's going to be tricky for them to host an event with 100 people, a full 200 yards from the closest restroom, as a matter of practicalities. They would probably have to come back in then and seek an amendment to the permit to add restrooms there, which could get tricky based on this enhanced septic. Do you know anything about this, Rachel? I
don't, but I can't understand why they would not. I mean, it seems to me that's implied that porta potties are allowed, and I do think that this language about requiring an enhanced sewage treatment design would probably be them thinking that they were coming in to develop bathrooms, which is not part of this application. So sometimes I feel that it's always good that we get all the information, but sometimes all the information just leads to confusion, and so it just doesn't make sense that you wouldn't allow porta potties. So I don't.
We're not proposed to report back on consent that's clarified.
I wouldn't want to hold us up.
No, I know, but I mean, no matter what we do, we get a report back on consent that clarifies the opinion, your opinion that
it might also be helpful in the rare circumstance that environmental health really intended to prevent porta potties.
Why?
That it's very common to include porta potties, so it's doubtful. But if in the rare event that they wanted to preclude porta potties based on something going on out there, you could add a condition allowing for administrative approval for a restroom if it were required. I mean, this has been a long process, and my memory gets a little hazy as to the iterations of the review process.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that they are allowed, frankly.
Well, it makes sense to me for 6 events.
Tons of sense, yeah. So I guess I wanted to associate my thoughts with Commissioner Guth, and so I won't repeat all the things that he said, but I do agree with you about, especially with regard to other properties in this area who might be wanting the same entitlements in the future. I think that will be looked at on an individual case-by-case basis, and this shouldn't be thought of as setting a precedent if we are to approve this altogether. I do want to commend the Lesters and how they've approached this, the planning for this application. I think that we see a number of use permits and projects come through, and some are better than others, and this one was really well done. I think the site, these types of use permits for small events and large events, if that's what we're going to be contemplating, are a big deal for the neighborhood. And I think certain sites are not conducive to those types of events, and some some are, and I think this site is one of the sites that does lend itself to allowing for larger events. So I would be supportive of that and how the ZA has conditioned it. I do have some concerns about our commission approving this application, knowing that the code modernization is not complete and that these types of events are, there are going to be regulations proposed for these types of events in that packet. So I do have some concerns about this commission, in a sense, putting the cart ahead of the horse as far as that, and then creating this property potentially could be an outlier depending on what the Board of Supervisors does with that code mod packet. So in saying that, I do have some suggestions in the conditions of approval that were approved by the ZA. I think under M, I'd rather have the permit, the review of the permit come to this commission, the Planning Commission, on consent. So maybe that could read, this permit shall be subject to public review by the Planning Commission on their consent agenda.
What condition, what or not?
Condition M on page 23. And then I'd also suggest deleting condition P.
Deleting it?
Yeah. It just doesn't make sense that they could come in within 6 months.
So we have conditions in two places. We have it at 235, so we're talking.
I'm looking at the conditions of approval that were revised from the ZA, the revised conditions of approval from the...
Page, please.
Well, they start on page 16, and then the conditions I'm speaking of are on page 23. The big bolded page numbers.
Want to get rid of P.
Would you consider, instead of getting rid of P, it seems like the intent of that is to look at some months of operations and see if a larger number of large events can be held. My concern about that was that if it was just a 6-month period and maybe it didn't start till September, it wouldn't capture the larger events during their prime months, which are the summer months. So I was thinking of, before you said that, of having it be at the same time as the 1-year review. And then that would capture a full year of operations, and it could then be considered to be an increase at that time.
Yeah, I guess that I would rather, since the I'd rather them, if they want to apply for more, I would rather that happen after the board has approved regulations for these very types of events. I mean, they're going to be approved, they're going to be approving or not, depending on what happens. I mean, this is part of the problem. Like, we're kind of out here. I mean, I understand we could approve this under the wine regs, pretty much, but I feel like we're kind of going out on a limb before we know the board is going to be really looking into this. So I'd rather, if they want to apply for more, come in after that.
Okay, and
that's my sense.
In response, I have asked staff how long this process is estimated to take, and they think that it could take, if I understand the environmental review, at least another year, year and a half. There's no consultant contract yet on it. So we could be talking several years before we have a fully accepted EIR and...
I mean, I don't think it would be several years, but it could be years, plural. Yeah, I agree. But I think that, I mean, I don't want to set this, I mean, that's...
Okay, I understand, yeah.
I'm comfortable not having a default to administrative approval of this increase, as you're suggesting. I mean, part of what we heard was, but between Mr. Gant and as well as Ms. Steinbrenner, this was an awfully big project with an awful lot of impact to get noticed at 300 feet and go to the ZA. And if there's only 2 people there on something of this much interest, this might be inconvenient for people. By the way, it's inconvenient for us too. We all have jobs, but it's a good way to go over this kind of thing and get everybody we can hear what the administrative issues are, and negotiate the code, and everybody can hear each other. I think a lot of what we've done here is positive, no matter how it comes out, and I think that's a big change to defer to an administrative permit here, because we haven't really heard about those impacts here. So I'm not comfortable I support the elimination of that condition.
I would also like to ask that council ask county council's opinion of approving something that has not been approved by.
Well, that was something that I was just getting ready to do. The council, if you would please, would we be within our authority to go ahead and approve this particular application for the large events? And we can condition it to some extent, but would it then drive the modernization? I mean, would this be something that they could overturn eventually? I mean,
well, the code provides procedures for amendment of permits, as we just experienced today. The deal with the code mod process is that we look at current code until that code modernization process has been complete. So until those amendments are in place, all we can do is look at our current code. This project has its own utilities. We have reviewed our current code and considered the impacts of this activity. It's not related to activities that would be permitted under the code mod. It's essentially you have to draw a line somewhere, and right now we're still under current code. So I don't share the concern with approving this prior to the code modernization. I might if this were an event center and not a winery that is authorized by code, if we weren't looking at this winery code right now, which we are. So I don't necessarily share that concern. In terms of this particular condition that you were just calling out, I would tend to concur with the idea of deleting it. I don't like the terminology, particularly administrative permit. Our code provides for a way to modify permit approvals, and so the permit holder can initiate that under current code without including this. So I have some concern. I don't know what the process would look like just calling it administrative permit. So I think they can do that under current code, but
it's not level 3, so there's a problem that this might be at cross with another statute.
That could be a concern. I think that it's just not clear what the procedure would be, just calling it an administrative permit.
Well, shall I go ahead and try a motion? And I wanted to say, though, in my remarks that I am very disappointed in the code modification program not being available to us, and that I do feel that there is reason for cumulative effects of these types of projects. Nonetheless, I was also, as Commissioner Dan, very impressed with the application and with the reputation of the Lester family. And I think this is one of the most beautiful properties I've ever been on. Just so special. I can understand why you want to take gentle care of it. So I would suggest that we approve the project with the conditions as listed, except for the deletion of condition P. And did we want to include a condition that wine with grapes grown on the property be
Well, if you want to make a motion with regard to the conditions and just your base motion, I'll ask to do a friendly amendment if you get a second to put in some of the findings changes.
Sure. Okay. So I think that's my motion.
Well, there was that Commissioner Dan's suggestion that on condition P get X'd out and condition M get modified to be planning commission and not zoning administrator.
Oh, on M, okay.
Yeah. I'll second that.
All right.
But I have a request for a friendly amendment, which would just be changing some language in conditions of approval that D1, large special events, that we leave it as it is, but add after the word Sunday, these large special events are limited to events that feature tasting as part of the event, available, parentheses, available to all suitable participants, close parentheses, or include sale of wine made on-site or from grapes grown on-site. Oh, no, on the subject property, not site on the subject property. So that would be a change to that large special event. And that findings, the required findings for development on land considered commercial agriculture. I'm doing this way back on page 229, but it is the ag findings. I'd like to, because of our discussion with regard to this not being the development, not being on the CA portion, I'd like to cross out everything after the first full sentence where it says the proposed improvements do not, etc. And I'll read the first sentence and then add. The applicant is proposing to occupy the barn with wine tasting room / winery pick events and proposed outdoor deck area, comma, and parking lot for visitors for wine tasting, comma, winery pickup events, comma, and special events, comma, but these developments do not occur on the CA zone lot. Oh, I should say this more slowly, Steve. But these developments do not occur on the CA zone lot, forming a portion of the project area. Thus, CA findings are not implicated with this project. And then in the discussion below 2 that says the proposed winery and winery events are incidental, line out that entire paragraph and replace it with, as discussed above with regard to finding 1, the development does not occur on the CA zone portion of the project.
And Commissioner, I'm going to ask you to repeat all of that because the first part, when you said page 229, I was looking at the large print 229.
Small print 229. All right, I can read that again. I'll just make it shorter this time though.
Okay.
In finding 1, there's a long first sentence, and before the period, the comma, but these developments do not occur on the CA zoned lot, forming a portion of the project area. New sentence, thus, CA findings are not implicated with this project, and X out the rest of the paragraph.
Okay.
Finding 2, did you get finding 2? Finding 2, not the finding from code, but the analysis below that starts the proposed winery and winery events.
Right. That
all gets X'd out and replaced entirely with, as discussed above with regard to finding 1, comma, the development does not occur on the CA zone portion of the project period. So I request that as an amendment to the motion. Would you accept that as making the motion, maker of the motion?
Yes. What about striking out amplified music? That
So,
would help the neighborhood.
There was a second of previously, and we're still
Yes,
stuck.
we're in discussion. The
amended motion has to be seconded. She accepted the amendment. Wasn't it your second, or did I second it?
You seconded it.
And I second my own. Yes. Okay, second.
Okay.
So now we can discuss it.
Now we can discuss that.
Things might
you know, there was one, under the large special events and the conditions of approval under D7, it's very specific in where the speakers are supposed to be pointed. I'm just not sure where that came from, why. I just don't know that we want to specify that in particular, though. I didn't mention it before a motion was made, so I don't know what others feel about that.
Well, that came from the noise study.
It did.
Didn't it?
Yeah,
it might have come from an environmental review where we were concerned that the general plan threshold could potentially be it's a greater distance to the south, to the southern property line than the northern property line.
When I was out there, it seemed like that was an illogical way to point the speakers if you were going to specify which way to point them, which I actually am in favor of not specifying where one would point speakers, but because it seemed like you could see neighbors to the south, whereas like looking to the north and east, you couldn't see any neighbors. But if that was a recommendation from an expert,
If we can't find a basis for it, I'll offer another amendment to the motion.
Yeah, at this point, I can't recall. It would have been a mitigation measure had it come from the environmental coordinator. It might have been an afterthought during consideration of the zoning administrator and improperly noted in the conditions. It could have been based on what I thought the noise study evaluated, and I was trying to be careful to make sure that the setback to the various property lines wasn't going to be offended by the direction of the speakers. Since it's a greater distance to the south than it is the north, and I mean, I would defer to the noise consultant truthfully in determination.
Same.
Yeah.
We're in Lucky still here.
Okay. Do you want to invite him up?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, Jeff Pack again, acoustical consultant. The speaker direction really doesn't matter. They can face them south or north, either way. We tested both directions, and either direction resulted in no noise excesses. So it doesn't, you don't have to specify which direction. Yeah, I think it all depends on how the venue is set up, where the people are going to be, and which area they want to use for wedding receptions.
Seeing as how we have a general plan limit that's codified also, and so that is one thing, regardless of our condition, if the noise is beyond limits at the property line to neighbors, they can make that complaint regardless of which direction these speakers are pointing. I'm fine to offer another amendment, if the motion maker will take it, to delete the last sentence, speakers associated with large events shall be directed south.
Can you strike amplified music entirely? It would help the neighborhood so much. They'll have to deal with traffic first, let them deal with that, and then bring in amplified music later if there are no problems with traffic.
So I accepted that.
You accepted his?
Yes.
Okay. And now we're discussing that.
I'll re-second my offered amended motion. Friendly amendment.
I'd like to chime in here on this, and I'm a little reluctant to go ahead and make this big leap to large special events. But I would like to do so with the idea that this is a test case, so that definitely it comes back for review after 1 year. This says 1 year after the issuance of the permit.
That would be following the final of the building permit, they would commence, because there could take some time for them to remodel the building. And their use is under our standard ordinance procedures. The use isn't authorized to commence until after the building permit final.
So then, should we make this clear that these are large events pursuant to the winery ordinance?
Well, I've tried to put that into the condition so that it's not an inference, well, I guess it is an inference. Stating that it's compliant doesn't make it compliant. Making the condition compliant makes it compliant.
Okay.
In my view.
Chair Lazenby, if I could offer some kind of comments on this. I think first, to that concern, it's in the record that we're dealing with this ordinance and the authority under this, and the motion reflects that. But also, it might help ease your mind a little bit about sort of this precedent-setting idea that the code actually specifies that the limits on the events set for tasting and on-site sales, those limits shall be set by condition on the use approval based on the individual merits of the location and surroundings of the proposed winery. So what we do on this property isn't going to determine what we can do on another property. Every property is going to be looked at independently and based on those factors that are listed in code, and that's under current code.
Okay, thank you. And this will definitely come up for review in 1 year?
If we approve the motion.
The last comment I'll make is I'm not comfortable in general with putting amplified music events in residential and agricultural areas. I viewed it as a wide open property. I couldn't hear noise from the street way below it. The unique aspect of this spot allows me to see a way to support it, but it's not something I could see happening in a lot of cases, especially narrow canyons and steep canyons, especially those kinds of canyons.
I share your concern too, but we have a noise study that assures us that it's going to be okay. I'd like to call for the vote.
Yep. Okay. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Guth?
Yes.
Commissioner Freitas?
Yes.
Schaefer Freitas? Commissioner Dan?
Yes.
And Chair Lazenby?
Yes.
And can we mention that Commissioner Shepard was not here?
So the motion passes 4-0.
I want to thank everybody again who came out, and I want to thank the appellants for bringing this to our attention. It may not be the result you wanted, but I got the more complete hearing out of things. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Yes, out of conflict can come a much better product, and let's hope that this will be. Thank you.
Becky?